and growing a healthy team of leaders that will carry out the overall church vision, that leader connection?
I think the one thing that I feel is most valuable is trust. We have a mantra that we've used, created back in the 90s, that we use, and it's this. Good communication creates great relationships. Great relationships create trust. Trust is the most valuable thing we have. For where there's a high level of trust, we will operate at the highest level of skills, talent, and anointing. Trust is a valuable thing because where there is the lack thereof, we have insecurity, fear, we squelch our anointing and our callings. So what we do is we try to create an environment that communicates so that we can form these great relationships. In the late 80s, my wife and I were pioneering a church in Colorado, and I had an experience that it was just an outstanding change and shift in me. I was pastoring a small church, we pioneering, and was called to the bedside of a lady that was dying of cancer that was in our church. And I went to her bedside, and she was breathing her last breaths. And as she was breathing her last breaths, her fists were tight, and she was fighting for life. And as she was fighting for life, she breathed her last breath. And when she finally breathed her last breath, I was standing beside her. Instead of just relaxing her hands started opening until they were just palmed out. And the Lord spoke to me, and He said, "The Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away." I thought that was a very fitting word for the time, but I felt God talking to me about something. So when I finished up with the family, I went straight to our little church, and for the next 2 hours, God talked to me about serving Him with an open hand. And He said, "I've been trying to put some things in your hand." And He said, "You've been so insecure that you've tightened around everything I've given you. And you will not allow me to put anything there." He said, "If you'll open your hand," He said, "I'm going to move some things, but I'm going to put some things there." And for the next 2 hours, God worked me over. It was about 3 months later that I realized the effectiveness of that just time with Him. And when a couple comes to me that says, "Pastor, they're a wonderful couple, tithe payers, tremendous people," comes to me and says, "We just feel like we need to leave." And when they did, my heart was smitten, and I thought, "Well, what are you going to do? How are you going to reel these in?" And then the Lord spoke to me, and He said, "Serve me with an open hand." And so I let them go. About 3 months later, I get a knock on the door, and it's the FBI. The FBI says, "Does this couple go to your church here?" I said, "No."
Boy, that was great, wasn't it?
He said, "Well, be glad." When I closed the door, that couple went to prison, still in prison today. When I closed the door, I knelt down and I said, "God, I'm going to serve you with an open hand. I'm going to trust you." Because the reason we can't trust people is because we've not yet learned to trust God. When we learn to trust God, we trust people. And the reason that we smother people is because we're insecure. We don't have confidence that God is going to do what He said He will do. Minister, God will take care of you. There's a God gravity about you, that everything that God has for you is coming to you, and everything that God doesn't want for you is being repelled. You're in the kingdom, and the kingdom's in you, and in this environment there is a God gravity. Trust is the most important thing. I'll close with this. There are two wonderful books on trust that have been just recent. One of them is recently published, and that is The Trust Edge by David Horsager. And then another one is M.R. Covey, all right, The Speed of Trust. The business world in just the past 5 or 10 years has picked up the value of trust in an environment where you're going to be synergizing with leaders. Trust is the most valuable thing.
Very good. Very good, Brother Hargrove. Well, that was great. That was great.